Good evening, everybody. This is the Plan and Zoning Commission. We're going to go with our regular meeting. Today is April 25th at 6 p.m.-ish. We are in the City Council chambers located at 405 Municipal Drive in Kennedale, Texas, 76060. First item on the agenda, I'm going to do a call to order. To address the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding any agenda item, submit a request for speaker form before the meeting begins. If you need to speak at any time, please go ahead and excuse yourself and grab a form located on the table. Speakers are allotted 3 minutes, must limit their comments to the subject matter indicated on the form, and should address the Planning and Zoning Commission as a whole rather than the individuals, members, or staff. Pursuant to Texas Government Code 5510.071, the Planning and Zoning Commission reserves the right to adjourn to an executive or closed session at any time during the meeting to seek legal advice from the city or on any of the posted on the items on the agenda. Sir, can I get a roll call, please?
Andrew Mikowski, place 1.
Here.
Kevin Guo, place 3. And Socorro Martinez, place 5. Here. Oh, get to.
Here.
There we go. Chairman Brown, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Ross, and appreciate you being here for us today. All right, item 2, moving on, Visitor and Citizen Forum. At this time, anyone that wants to address the Planning and Zoning Commission about items not on the agenda, rules and procedures that addressing the Planning and Zoning Commission include, the call to order. Neither formal action or discussion may occur at this time. So in other words, it's a one-way. Those wishing to instead speak on an agenda item, please indicate their desire to speak on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Consider those items. Do we have anybody who would like to speak to the board at this time? All right. We're going to move into the regular session at this time. We're going to do the consent agenda. These matters have appeared on previous agendas, require little or no deliberation, or consider routine, minimal tasks. So if any discussion is desired, items may be removed from this. As part of this, what we're going to do is approve the minutes from February 29th, 2024. Everybody have a copy of those in front of you? Any discussion at this time? Andrew? No? All right. Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve accepting the minutes at this time.
I'll second.
You want a motion?
Oh, you're accepting this. Okay. I motion we approve the minutes from February.
Can I get a second, please?
I second the motion.
All right, all in favor to adopt the minutes from 29 February? Or wow, we're not even 25 now. Okay, February 29th, there you go. Raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Those that are approve, or this, wow. Ross, you have a unanimous to approve the minutes. All right, item B, items for individual consideration. Item 1 is to consider a request for the final plat for Emerald Crest Estates to create lots 1 through 10 and lot 1X as an X-ray, being lots R1 through R or through 5R and 6 Block 1, amending plat of Emerald Crest Estates in addition to the City of Kennedale, Tarrant County, Texas. That'd be you, staff.
Good evening, Commissioners. So this particular item is just a request for final plat. Emerald Crest has been a project that has been under review for quite some time. It has gone through all its engineering review approval, so now it's just coming to you before a ministerial approval of creating the actual lots. It's met all our zoning and engineering requirements, so with that, staff recommends approval.
All right, that we have no speakers on this. I'm going to go ahead and ensure anybody that on the board needs to have a discussion. Good?
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll accept a motion to approve this consideration for final plat for Emerald Estates.
I motion we approve.
All right, can I get a second, please?
Oh, I second the motion.
Okay. All in favor for accepting this consideration and recommending it, please say aye. 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 Unanimous, sir. All right, regular session 3C is public hearings. Item 1, and the only one, PZ case number 2408, to conduct a public hearing and consider a proposed conditional use permit as required by section 24.2C of the Unified Developmental Code for battery energy storage systems, a new land use located at 509 South New Hope Road, Tract 1 EE is an Echo Echo, and A is an Alpha 1327 TRS 2B01 and 2B04, Abstract 378, situated in the Cannon EC Survey and the 501 South New Hope Road, Block 1, Lot 1 of the Kim Edition, and the city of Kennedale, Tarrant County, Texas. Staff, you may make your presentation.
Thank you. That was certainly, I had to, it involved quite a bit of double checking, make sure I didn't miss a typo. I don't know who named it that, but anywho, okay, so with this is a new land use. So this is a conditional use permit that Parker Sloan of Cypress Creek Renewables, we have members from Cypress Creek Renewables here tonight, and they have a presentation that they'd like to present as well, but I'll just kind of give you an overview. This proposed development, a majority of it looks to take place at 509 South New Hope Road. You'll notice that 501 South New Hope Road has also been included in that as far as our postings, our notices. And that's because a portion of that particular track is being, would likely be utilized for access to the site. But in general, I just want to talk about the current status of the properties. We'll talk about the surrounding properties in the neighborhood there. And then I'll kind of get into the planning and zoning review that we did for the project. So, start with 501 South New Hope Road. So if you look on your staff report, this would be Exhibit A in the staff report. So the first tract of land is about 9.3 acres. It's currently zoned PD MHD. And so years ago, that was rezoned to a planned development to allow for the existing mobile home that's on site there. Reviewing all those minutes from that time ago, they were adamant about this is the only thing that would be placed at this particular site. That's why they put the PD involved, or the PD zone. They rezoned to a PD to allow for that mobile home structure that is there. That is obviously that's since been sold, but adjacent to it, to the south, is the larger parcel, which is 509 South New Hope Road. That's about 48 acres. And so that particular tract of land is unique in the sense that it has a split zoning. Why? That's a good question. But it has a split zoning. And so the tract that is off of New Hope Road, that tract is about a little bit over 8.5 acres. That is currently zoned R2 single family residential. But the back acreage a majority of the property, the back acreage is currently zoned I industrial. And if you look at the exhibit on both parcels, you'll see both floodway and floodplain that kind of meanders through the property there. So both lots are also heavily treed, and they're owned by the same entity. We do have the property owner here tonight with us as well. So that's the current status of the property. Oh, at 509, the only thing that's really there right now, there's a small accessory structure. I think there's probably some sort of ag operations that kind of go on there, but otherwise it's mostly undeveloped. So in the surrounding properties, so just to the north of 501 New Hope Road, we have R2 single family residential that is located north of 501. We have the Encore substation to the east. To the west, we have the R2 properties that are off of New Hope Road, pretty large estates, tracts of land that you see there. Further west behind those tracts is we have the old drag strip here in town. Now, if we look at 509 South New Hope Road, the everything to the east is essentially zoned industrial. It's currently zoned industrial. To the west, obviously, we have the single family that we just mentioned, but we also have industrial further to the south. The large southern tract makes up, I believe, top portion of where Harrison Jet is located. So where the proposed development would take place, it would be surrounded by industrial to the east, industrial uses to the south, and then kind of shielded and mixed in with a lot of the existing trees that are there. So that's what is currently there in the surrounding neighborhood. The future land use plan that we have adopted calls for this area to be a neighborhood residential area in parks and open space. So if you look on Exhibit B, I'll kind of describe what you're looking at right there. Exhibit B speaks, the future land use plan, that's a component of our current comprehensive plan. Of course, you know, we're currently in the process of updating our comprehensive plan and also our future land use plan, but this is what we have on the books to date. So all our reviews are based off of that. Within a neighborhood residential district that the future land use plan envisions, the types of development that the community has said they wanted to see is in this plan is that you'd have neighborhood serving retail and services. You'd have maybe some small scale multifamily restaurants and community type offerings there in that particular neck of the woods. If you look at Exhibit B, you'll see large orange circles, these nodes that are there. Within those nodes, you have like an urban corridor, neighborhood village type activity, and they place those nodes at intersections, foreseeable intersections that the city envisioned. And so you'll notice that in a green, that little green strip, that green strip, it kind of speaks to the Little School Road extension, where Little School Road would extend over the parkway, over the rails, the railroad, and then tie into New Hope Road. Little School Road, that extension project has been a recent conversation of late, and that I'll talk a little bit more about that particular project. But where does that come from? It comes from our future land use plan. So the one that we have on the books said, hey, we envision an extension of Little School Road to tie into New Hope. And that extension would cut through these particular parcels, 509 South New Hope, 501 South New Hope. So just give you a little bit of history about the Little School Road project and where that's at. So a planning and route study for the road extension is currently underway. City Council has recently approved, when I mean recently, I meant last year, approved a route study to be performed by Freese and Nichols. So Freese began their environmental assessments, preliminary surveying. They haven't done any design work on the actual project, but right now a lot of it's more feasibility what kind of obstacles would they likely encounter? How many times do they have to cross over a creek? And so that discussion's been going for some time. The city had some participating funds from Tarrant County for this project. At this time, I would say it's somewhat unclear on the extent on, when you look at that green road. I provided you an exhibit, but let's look at Exhibit C. So if you look at Exhibit C, that is the preferred route study that Freese and Nichols provided council. There was at one point, there were about 3 options. There was an A, B, and C, and one of those options was a little further north. One of those options was a little further south, and there was an option, obviously, that was right down the middle. And this one, I believe, is that middle option. And if you look on Exhibit C, it's outlined in yellow, and I've placed a green box around this particular first phase of that project, is that how it meanders through both tracks, 509 and 501. That's where what I'm saying is, because it's still in the feasibility, the exact location of where the road will be is still yet to be determined. So they did approve the bonds for this project, CO bonds, last year. City Council approved that. This, I would say early summer, spring, late spring, they will be, it'll come back to council for their consideration on whether or not they're going to actually issue the bonds. Conversation of late, though, has been concerning in the sense that the project costs have risen significantly higher. And so the project itself, I wouldn't say it's at a stall, but there's going to need to be a little bit more discussion on that, obviously, right? And so it will require additional action by City Council to approve said bonds. So that's obviously yet to be determined. But should the bonds be issued for the project, this new road would essentially create a new gateway into that western part of Kennedale that they've been talking about, or the community's been talking about developing for some time. And so that would be a new gateway into the western part of the community. So that kind of concludes just the surrounding properties, the neighborhood, and review of the future land use plan. I want to move into kind of some of the history that we've had with this particular project. I'll tell you, so it was in May of last year, our development staff, we met with Cypress Creek, that they first brought this idea to the table, what they were considering doing there. And they've named it Fort Watt. And I told them before, I kind of like that name, kind of like that name. And it was it's a battery energy storage system that is new to Kennedale, doesn't currently exist in our land use tables. That's why we're here tonight, essentially. And so we met with staff about that. During the review of it, it was essentially, and they'll be able to describe their operations and process than I will, but my understanding is essentially you have these large containers that contain modules and batteries within them. They either sit on a concrete slab or a pier, and there is a bank of them. And this whole development would be tied into the Encore substation that's further north, and they essentially charge the batteries when demand is low, and they release it when demand is high. I guess you can say that does provide some resiliency to the power grid. I know that's been a big conversation kind of throughout the state, so that's our understanding of it. They've provided in their staff report some sample pictures of what that would look like. Cypress Creek has also provided P&Z with a lot of literature, Q&A. They've done a lot of, they've done some advertising with TML as well. This is a conversation that I don't think is going to be unique to Kennedale. I think there's other communities that are going to have this same conversation as well. But that was the initial conversation that we had back in May. In August, There, it came down to an interpretation of how we would look at this new use, or this use, given the existing land uses that we have in the zoning currently. And so their interpretation and desire and hope at the time was for it to be viewed as like a regional utility. And when we looked at it, staff, our interpretation was that this would be more of outdoor storage of equipment. And so we went to the Board of Adjustment to get a land use determination, and that was back in August. And so the Board of Adjustment considered the case. We had a public hearing, a lot of great discussion. They considered, and what they ruled was that it wasn't either one. This was a new land use. It's something that Kennedale, P&Z and council should consider on its own merits. And so they recommended it be submitted to P&Z and City Council for their determination or their consideration as well. So that's sort of the history of the project. Why we're here tonight is that this is a conditional use permit request. And in the nature of conditional use permits, the purpose that the zoning or our UDC has that in place is to consider land uses on their own merits. We do have particular land uses in our current tables that you'll see a C, which represents a conditional use permit, meaning we're not okay with this just by right in general, but we want to review it on a case-by-case basis. The issue with this particular land use, proposed land use, is that it's new. It doesn't exist in the development code. It would be a new use, and because of that, that's why we're here tonight. In fact, the UDC starts off in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 talking about the limitations of the UDC, that it cannot foresee every use that would come in advances in technology. So again, that's why we're here tonight. Now, following the BOA meeting that we had in August, we've remained in communication with Cypress Creek Renewables. We had additional concerns and questions, and they've obliged us pretty well, I believe. And so we had a meeting not long ago. I believe this was probably early this year, January, February, around that time frame. So we had a meeting that included myself, the fire chief that was here, the fire marshal that was here at the time, and we met. And the fire department had some concerns about this development, and so the purpose of that meeting was to answer any questions that they have, talk about the redundancies that the battery systems have built in place. We talked about other projects that they've done, what those look like. Are there any events of any major incidents or hazmat incidents? Those kind of questions kind of came up. They also, following that meeting, the fire department requested that a plume study be done, and it's essentially a study that determines, or if they intentionally set these things ablaze and they test these, what would occur. And so at every stage of the system, there is I believe it was an NFPA test, is that correct? NFPA test, and that's the body that puts together the fire codes, right? That was done, and they were able to kind of show at each stage of the project, there was a redundancy put in place to prevent what's called thermal runaway. So a large-scale incident, right? So, and they'll speak a little bit more about that, so I don't want to butcher that for them. But that was some of the concerns that the fire department had, the location where it was located, because it's essentially centrally located in town. The fire department had some concerns about that. And so the fire marshal that was here at the time drafted a letter following that, after talking with them, reviewing it, talking with other jurisdictions about what their response would be, what their concerns would be. Since then, I know that we have Chief Brown recently retired, so the interim chief, I've spoken to him about that. I said, hey, what's given all these updates that we have with the redundancies, and we've got the studies that are coming in that they'll be presenting, what's the plan? You know, has it changed? Do you still have concerns? And they said, listen, when this happens, or if something were to happen there, our response is going to be the same either way, because they plan on worst case scenario. That's the essence of public safety, and particularly emergency management, emergency response is the worst-case scenario. And so should there be something that occurred here, their response would essentially be still remain as a hazmat incident for the sake of safety and precaution for the community, despite that, if a study shows that, hey, if something were to go south, there's a lot of air, a lot of wind that would dissipate any potential hazards on that. Their response to me was essentially, we're still going to treat this like a major incident. So we have some concerns with our own staffing. We're likely going to have to call out outside agencies. And so that was sort of the further discussions tied to this particular project that we've had. And so one of the things they mentioned is that the central location of where it's at is a concern that they have, whereas other jurisdictions they talk to, it's kind of reserved to the outer rim of a community. And so, but they have other examples that I believe they'll be able to speak to on where they have had these types of installations, and I believe they're going very well for them. So Cypress Creek, I'll wrap up, but Cypress Creek, they've provided you an in-depth review or frequently asked questions. They provided estimated tax benefits to the community. I want to encourage both P&Z and council to review these documents. And given the need for resiliency of the state's electrical power grid, so alternative energy systems, provide a feasible solution. So zoning in most jurisdictions, however, often fails to kind of foresee or account for new advancements in technology. And like I mentioned earlier, our current zoning is no exception. So it didn't foresee what advancements in technology could occur. But given this, we believe that it is prudent to consider this under a conditional use permit under its own merits and through this application process. The proposed development, I'll say that it would be obviously new. It would be not only unique to Kennedale, but also unique to the region. But there are some concerns, obviously, that I've spoken to here tonight. Given those concerns raised by the fire department, and then the simple fact that our future land use plan, which I have to base my review off of, it's not consistent with that future land use plan. Because of those items or those particular measures, we don't recommend approval, because my job is to tell you whether it's consistent with our plans or not. Of course, I'd hate to recommend something and it'd be contrary to what our public safety folks are telling us as well. And so like to have that discussion here tonight. They'll answer any questions that you have. I'm happy to do the same, but that concludes my staff report, and happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Do you know if the EPA's been brought into this study, considering the proximity of our water thoroughfare there?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I said, do you know if the EPA has been consulted on this, or a study's been done considering the flood area that this is actually proximity to?
I believe so. So a lot of their environmental permitting, that's number one that they have to, and they'll be able to speak to more about that as well. But they have engaged the appropriate parties for those reviews. There is still a lot of environmental assessment that has to be done on their project. There is permitting that they'll speak to on the state level, but dealing with ERCOT, everything like that. So it's not just Kennedale that's going to be reviewing this. There's ERCOT, there's the state, and there's other agencies that out there that would require approval before this project could kick off. And so they've actually mentioned, hey, we're happy to talk to P&Z as many times as we need to, talk to council as many times we need to, and the community as many times we need to make sure everyone kind of understands what their process is and what the potential benefits to the community could be.
I didn't have anything further.
So one of the fire chief's primary concerns are the way that they would have to respond to this type of an incident, right? So if it were to catch fire, they're going to basically run it as, we need to evacuate people, we need to make sure that everything treated as a hazmat scenario. how does that response, how would their response differ from one of the oil and gas drilling sites or storage facilities that we have around the area? How would their response differ from a fire at one of those facilities?
I think it would be the same. I think it would be the same. They still have those concerns. Again, there's a lot of property in town that is zoned industrial. Is zoned industrial. And so if there was a hazmat situation over there, they would still be having to call in other agencies to assist with that. I don't know if there would be a evacuation, probably maybe a shelter in place for something like this. The plume study that I referenced, the ones that we reviewed and we had exposure to, they essentially showed that the concerns of the gases wouldn't escape the limits of the property. And our assumption is that when that study is done at this location, it would net the same result, is that because it's secluded, right? It's in the back. It's shielded from any residential that I would think would come to would be adjacent to it, significantly adjacent to it. I don't really see that with the Little School Road project coming in. That itself would be a busy corridor, so you probably wouldn't want to put residential right up against that as well. But again, when you're coming over the bridge, over the rail, right, what are you going to look at, right? So that's the gateway. At that point, it would likely be visible. But as far as response goes, emergency response, what they've relayed to me is that they would treat it the same.
And you were talking about that there are redundant fire suppression systems within these things. Can you so there's different types of fires that will occur with these, like some of them are ablaze, some of them are just like melting of the material.
I can speak to a little bit of that, but I think it may be best for their presentation because it's going to be very, very in-depth. And when I mean redundancies, I mean from the single cell battery or the batteries themselves within the module, and then the whole panel itself, and then the actual entire thing. So at every level, they were able to show that, hey, there's an actual NFPA test. I'm familiar with NFPA testing when it comes to building materials. You know, when we talk about a fire-rated door, right? It's a 1-hour door. And the reason we know it's a 1-hour door is because it was tested, it was set on fire intentionally, and they have a timer, right? And they do studies, and it shows right at the 1 hour, then it collapses. And so NFPA governs ASTM. There's a lot of testing agencies and standards put in place, and these have specific ones tied to this type of technology as well.
So your other comment was that at the current stage of the future land use map and the existence of, or the absence of the existence of this zoning, that's why staff is recommending to not approve it. So right now we're under review of our Unified Development Code.
Mm-hmm.
Is there another effort for future land use?
At this location, we still envision neighborhood residential in the one that's currently underway. What I actually expressed to Cypress Creek is that when we review and update our land use tables, we're going to be including alternative energy systems, because that's a thing these days, and it's something that is lacking in our current zoning. Now, it'll likely not be permitted by right, but it will still require a special exception, or excuse me, a CUP of something of that nature, to give those particular projects an opportunity to approach P&Z and council and have those discussions.
Okay. So with this existing lot, the 509 portion of it, I hope that you have a slide that shows the extent of the flooding plain in this area. Okay. Because with this being zoned residential, and then hopefully you have a slide that has the overlay of the street. Okay, great. Because right now, right, what they can't see is that most of the land portion within this area is under a floodplain, within the 100-year floodplain. And then just north of that, the part that isn't in the floodplain is where the road is going to be going. So if this is zoned for residential, where are the houses going to go?
That's a good point. In fact, they've actually got two options, and the most recent one takes into account where Little School Road, we believe, would be. And they have, none of their project, with the exception of an access road, would be through the floodplain area. All of their development, where these would be placed, would be outside the floodplain. And so they've actually restructured and moved some things around to ensure that were the case. There is an access road that obviously would cut through that. But let's say this whole thing was residential. And in fact, this site is relegated to the industrial side of the acreage, not the residential. The only part that involves the residential and the lot to the north is essentially access to the site. But let's say it's all residential. You'd have residential tucked in the only feasible areas that you can build, and that's the area where they're planning on putting these, or would like to put these as well.
So we have residential that's going to be tucked in behind a Encore substation, a major thoroughfare, and then a floodplain.
Ain't that something?
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Sure, to answer that, I mean, there are types of residential that you see that are next to the rail. Single family, I don't know. I know a lot of people that have bought nice homes and they complain about the gas well and the railroad behind their house. I'm like, it was there before you were. So, good question.
All right, staff, we can go ahead and move on to the next presentation, so I'm sure that's going to bring up some more questions.
Yeah, I mean,
I have a few questions to ask the
Are you
director.
going? Okay, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I have two questions. One regarding the size of the facility and another regarding the safety of the facility, as brought up by the fire chief. The first one is regarding the size of the facility. And according to the United States Energy Information Administration, also known as the EIA, as a part of the U.S. Department of Energy, they state that the United States battery storage capacity has been growing since 2021 and could increase by 89% by the end of 2024. And as of 2023, California has installed the most battery storage capacity of any state in the country at 7.3 gigawatts. And for the people in the audience, 1 gigawatt is equivalent to 1,000 megawatts. So California has 7,300 megawatts worth of battery storage capacity, followed by the state of Texas, which has 3.2 gigawatts or 3,200 megawatts. And all other states have a total of 3.5 gigawatts. So the state of Texas almost has as much battery storage capacity as the 48 other states. And currently, by 2024, developers plan to add another 15 gigawatts worth of power in battery storage capacity and 9 gigawatts in 2025. And as mentioned, the state of Texas has 3,167 megawatts worth of battery storage capacity. And this facility that is being planned, it has an estimated storage capacity of 400 megawatts. And 400 megawatts compared to the entire state of Texas's worth of a battery capacity which is 3,167, it'll represent about 12% of the total capacity. So 400 over 3,167, that's about 12%. And the largest facility is located in California, in Moss Landing, which has a capacity of 750 megawatts. And from the end of 2023 until 2025, developers plan to add around maybe 300 extra other battery storage projects all over the United States, this potentially being one of them. And 50% of those, half of those, will be in the state of Texas. And I also wanted to mention the 5 largest new battery storage projects that will be that are planned either this year or next year. They're the following. So the top 3 that are being planned are all in Texas. The first one is 621 megawatts capacity-wise. The second one is 600. The third one is 500. In fourth place, we have California, one in California, which has a capacity of 500 megawatts, and the fifth one, which is 443. So the one that's being proposed is 400 megawatts, which I suspect will probably be in the top 10 of the 300 that will be planned this year and next year, or this year or next year in 2025. So I'm wondering why the developers plan to construct such a large facility that is worth, that will store an equivalent of 400 megawatts, which will be in the top 10 that are being planned on being installed either this year or next year, and which will also represent one of the largest in the United States. Remember, the largest one is 750 megawatts in California. So 400, this will be, I suspect, also maybe in the top 20 or top 30 if this project were to continue forward. And usually for large-scale lithium-ion battery installations, they're usually 100 to 300 megawatts. This one is 400. And according to the U.S. Department of Energy, this will be at the higher end of the spectrum. So this facility will be larger. So in addition to constructing a lot of batteries, you also need a cooling system and additional buildings to support this infrastructure. So my question is why is this location in Canada being chosen to construct this facility, and why is a capacity of 400 megawatts being chosen?
Those are great questions and great points there. The location to the Encore substation, the proximity to the Encore substation is why I believe this site was chosen. The scale of it is something that I believe they can probably speak to. Okay. You mentioned about, yeah, and so this may be a good transition point, I believe, to answer those questions. Happy to bring them up, and they can speak more to that. But regarding you said water line supply issues, these projects would have a fire suppression system on there as well.
Okay, and I have another question regarding the safety, which was brought up by the Canada Fire Department. And safety is an important issue. And I want to point out that with a 400 megawatt facility, it will likely cover several acres with multiple battery storage containers and associated infrastructure, such as maybe inverters, cooling systems, and safety apparatus. But the experts here, they'll give a presentation, go into more detail about this. I'm just giving like the general summary of what I think will be constructed as part of the facility. But I want to point out that there were several incidents, not only in the United States, but also internationally regarding these lithium-ion battery installations. Between 2017 and 2018 in South Korea, they had over 20 major fires, big fires related to energy storage systems, some of them which include lithium-ion battery installations. And this prompted a significant review and overhaul of battery safety regulations in the country. And they were linked to thermal runaway in lithium-ion battery systems used for grid energy storage. In 2019, in the state of Arizona, there was an explosion that injured 4 firefighters. And this was also traced back to a thermal runaway event in a 2 megawatt lithium-ion battery system. This system is 2 megawatts compared to the proposed system, which would be 400 megawatts. And this led to a revisiting of the safety measures and emergency response protocols for energy storage sites. In 2021, in the country of Belgium, I think it's located in Central Europe somewhere, there was a major fire that occurred at a battery energy facility, which was also attributed to a lithium-ion battery failure. And this fire highlighted the challenges of managing large-scale battery installations, for example, regarding fire containment and toxic fuel management. And in California, where they have been expanding the battery storage, remember, California is in first place with the number of battery storage units installations and the construction of newer installations. And there were also several reports of smaller scale lithium-ion battery malfunctions that have led to fires, but these were all on a smaller scale. And in New York, in East Hampton, there was an isolated fire of about 5 megawatts at a 5 megawatt facility that was caused by an electrical fault. But this one was contained without any broader safety or power concerns. And lastly, in California, at the Valley Center Energy Storage Facility, there was another fire which prompted evacuations and a shelter-in-place order. So basically, in general, there were several incidents, both in the United States and internationally, regarding the lithium-ion battery installations, mostly at smaller utility scale, like so in the 2 to 4 megawatt, in the 2 to 4 megawatt regions. But there were very few, larger incidents that required evacuation and a shelter-in-place order, like the one that I mentioned in California. And I want to emphasize that, in general, widespread disasters regarding these battery units and these installations, they're very rare. Out of the ones I mentioned, probably maybe 2 or 3 out of the approximately 500 located internationally prompted any issues. But there were several smaller incidents that did happen occasionally, more than, of course, the people installing these installations would like, that I wanted to bring up. And I wanted to ask if the Kennedale Fire Department is adequately prepared to deal with a potential incident at the plant installation. I reviewed the documents saying, and I think one of the documents stated that the fire department could respond to the facility as if there was a gas leak, if I'm not mistaken, or a sort of respond to that incident in a similar way. But I was just wondering about if the Kennedale Fire Department would be equipped to deal with an incident if this installation was to be constructed, and the potential radius of any radius of evacuations that will have to be implemented if, for example, there was a large incident, which is very rare, I want to point out.
Sure, so I can take that in two phases. So let's talk about just the amount of projects that you referenced within the nation, within the different states, and then globally as well. Certainly, as I mentioned before, this conversation is not going to be unique to Kennedale. There's a lot of communities within Texas that will be having this conversation because the need to provide resiliency for the grid is an ongoing conversation. So, but that does take into, Texas has plenty of elbow room, right? And so there are a number of communities that have these as well. The second half of that is on the responses. The Kennedale Fire Department prepared for that. I'll say our firefighters here in Kennedale are up to the task, and I put them up against anybody else. They're a great group of folks, but like I mentioned, they will call on their mutual aid partners, just like our neighboring agencies. If they had a hazmat incident, they would be calling in additional support for that. But as you mentioned, the instances to where there was a severe incident like that is very, very rare. And so again, because of that, it's why we recommend that you ask questions, have them here, ask any questions that you have, and that's why we're having the conversation. And when we say that we don't recommend it, it's based off of those concerns that they've shared with us, and also that our future land use plan that's called for that envisions something else. So that's kind of where we stand on the matter.
Okay, thank you so much. And I have one more question. So for the residents who live nearby the location where this facility is to be planned to be constructed, have they been notified ahead of time of this project?
Yes, so part of the notification period is 3 things. We post a letter, post a notice in the newspaper. We post signs on site on both locations, and then we mail letters to property owners within 200 feet. In fact, once we get into the actual public hearing and that gets opened, and we have folks in the community that will be here to speak to that as well.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. I have no further questions.
Okay.
Good eve. Oh. It is. Jacob, you go ahead and answer some of the first questions. Let me get the.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jacob Gubrud. I am the Director of Energy Storage Engineering at Cypress Creek. In my career, I've only worked on energy storage projects. Kevin, I built the Moss Landing facility that you mentioned, so I appreciated the shout out, building the largest in the US. I've worked on over 30 gigawatt hours of energy storage projects throughout the United States, and I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Texas, and responsible for all engineering aspects of these projects. Kevin, I wanted to thank you for raising all those concerns. I'm going to quickly address those before we go through our PowerPoint that Parker has pulled up. I'm going to try and hit them all. If I miss some, forgive me. I'll answer them later. I'm happy to answer your questions and anyone else's questions about any of the stuff around energy storage. So I'll start with all the fire events that you mentioned. Absolutely recognize those. Very real. Very important to understand that every event that you mentioned is a different chemistry of lithium ion than what we're using. Those used what's called NMC, which is nickel, manganese, cobalt. Our proposed battery here is LFP, which is lithium iron phosphate. And one of the major advantages of lithium iron phosphate is it is significantly more thermally stable. I actually have a slide in our appendix slides that I can show that to you. But essentially, it's much less prone to thermally run away than NMC battery. And in the last really 2 to 3 years, since all the events happened in the late 2010s, pretty much everyone switched to LFP because NMC was a little more thermally unstable. On top of that, in terms of the South Korea fires, which have all been bad, they have a significantly less stringent installation codes than we do in the United States. It's one of the great things about our country. We hold ourselves to a high standard in terms of how we install this stuff and make sure that it's safe, and make sure that we're proactively addressing any of the concerns. In terms of the plume study, we should have that in the next couple of weeks. Typically what we've seen is which staff talked about, there is no toxic hazard outside of our project boundary. We'd expect the same result here. The input to that plume study is the fire testing that also is referenced by staff, where they literally set these on fire. They measure what is in the plume, how fast it's coming out, where it's coming out. We stick that all into a model and it says this is how far it will go in a worst case scenario. In terms of the quantity of projects that have had events, EPRI is a great resource for anyone who wants to research any events that have happened in the industry. It's the Electrical Power Research Institute. They have a database of every event that's happened in the industry. They also have articles according to their database, and they have an article that also validates this. 98% of these sites in the US have not had any issues. The 2% that have had an event, it has been contained to the site, and there's been no health risks to the surrounding environment. And then fire department prep, glad you touched on that. That's exactly why we're proactively meeting with your fire department. We want to make sure that they understand what this technology is and how to handle it. We're also required by code to provide an HMA, which is a hazard mitigation analysis, where we will look at all the hazards in our system and say, these are the hazards that exist. This is how we're mitigating them. And this is the redundancy in those steps of mitigation. We are also required to provide what's called an ERP, or an emergency response plan, that says if a worst case scenario happens, this is how you should handle it as a fire department, whether that's with the batteries themselves or just the general electrical infrastructure involved. And then we also will provide them training on an annual basis as part of our project as well, to make sure that they understand, especially with fire departments sometimes that have volunteers. We want to make sure that annually everyone's trained up on how to handle these events, and we're committed to that as part of the project. Oh, yes, and one thing to clarify, Kevin, our project is 200 megawatts, 400 megawatt hours. So the power is 200 megawatts, the duration is 2 hours. So 200 megawatts times 2 hours is 400 megawatt hours. So we do fall right in that range of the 100 to 300 that you mentioned. And we'll talk a little bit about why here in our PowerPoint.
Thanks, Jacob.
Howdy, my name is Ethan. I'm glad to be able to speak to y'all today. Today we're going to go through a little bit of an overview real quick of just introducing ourselves, about Cypress Creek, what we've done, who we are, and go through a little bit of what is energy storage, why it's helpful and why it would be good here in Kennedale. Go through some of the benefits of that project, and then look at both a site plan so we understand what exactly we're talking about, and then go through the safety of the project as well. So Cypress Creek was founded over a decade ago, and more specifically in Texas, we've been operating for 10 years now. You can see we have sites all over the country, pretty experienced, but specifically here in the state, we've got 18 operational projects and over 20 projects in various phases of development, all the way from, signing up leases to, in construction and, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month away from kicking off and being fully operational. Throughout those 10 years in Texas, we've generated, lots of investments as well as millions of dollars of payments flowing into the state, both to landowners as well as property taxes coming into the school districts, the cities, and the counties where our projects are located. So a little bit about what is energy storage, because it is a rather new phenomenon for a lot of cities. What it boils down to is they're really just batteries, a collection of lots and lots of batteries. And so they're used to store energy when we don't need it as much, and then give it back when we do need it, when that demand is higher. This goes a long way towards enhancing this grid reliability. With hotter summers and colder winters, we're facing more and more issues with, over demand and undersupply. And so hopefully helping out the resiliency of the grid can help avoid some of those tougher times and avoid things like blackouts and going without power. There's also a big economic benefit for these projects. With these projects, there's a lot of capital expenditure that we put in here, and a lot of that tax revenue flows in, like I said, to the school districts, to the cities, and to the counties that they're located in. There's also very minimal development impact, as we kind of saw. This is, it's tucked away back near the pre-existing substation. And so it's, not going to be visible from the main road, not going to be visible from the residences. And once it's operational, there's very little to no traffic impact whatsoever, no sounds, no smells, et cetera. Ideally, we forget it's even there. And finally, the lower cost of energy is a big benefit that we can see when we get higher demand and lower supply in these winter events, in these summer events. You can really get the price of energy spiking locally. And so by storing energy and giving it back when that demand is high, we can really help to even out that volatility and keep energy prices down for consumers in the area. So a little bit about what it'll look like. On the left here, this picture you see is one of our sites that is currently under construction in Houston. On the left half of that picture is the pre-existing substation in the area, and the right half of that picture is our project. And so you can see that it's about the same size. It's in that 5 to 10 acre range. And it's pretty well contained with tree coverage on all sides, and that's what we would envision for this project as well. On the right side of the screen, you'll see kind of what this looks like from ground level. This is one of our projects also here in the state, and you can see that these battery containers sit about 10 or so feet high when it's all said and done. So it's, lower profile than your average one-story house. And so especially with all the vegetation in the area, we really expect this to keep a very low profile and, and not be obtrusive. And now we want to talk about a little bit of why this is important here in the area. The whole metro region has been, has had really high demand for a while, and it's just growing, both population-wise, it's growing, which leads to increased demand, but also increased demand as we see an increasing electrification, of our society, whether that comes from electric vehicles, whether that comes from electric heat pumps, et cetera. there's more and more demand, and hopefully we can help to help the grid deal with that demand. The local infrastructure, as we'll see in a little bit, gets pretty stressed when it comes to these times of low supply and high demand. And so by putting energy storage here, right next to this substation, we can sort of store that power when it's abundant and when we don't need it, and give it back and sort of help that strain on the grid in those times when we do need it more. Like we said, it's this 200 megawatt facility for a 2-hour duration, and so it can really power a whole lot of homes. So that's if that's 80,000 homes for 2 hours or 40,000 households for 4 hours, et cetera. And it can really help bridge the gap in some of these stronger weather events that we've been seeing more and more often. And so now I think we'll talk a little bit about how the battery works over the course of the day, and I'll give it up to my colleague Parker to talk about this.
Thank you, Ethan. Parker Sloan, it's good to be with you tonight. So this graph, well, it goes against everything I've ever learned about giving people PowerPoint presentations because it's a little bit complicated, but this data is from ERCOT, and it shows you one 24-hour period of all the battery energy storage that exists on the grid in the ERCOT region. And it's showing you that 24-hour period for April 7th. There's nothing unique about April 7th. That's simply when I created this entire PowerPoint for you. And it's here to illustrate to you in the red and in the blue. So in the blue, as you can see on the left-hand side of the graph, is the evening, very early morning hours. Folks are asleep. There's less demand on the grid, but guess what? All of our power plants are still working, right? They're still on. And so these systems, these battery systems can charge and they discharge as folks wake up, which you see next in the red, that smaller spike of discharging where the batteries across Texas are discharging. People are getting up, getting ready for school and work. Kids are watching TV instead of eating their breakfast, that sort of thing. And as the day progresses, people are at work and school, they're not at home. There's less demand for electricity, and you can see the batteries again in the blue charging up. And then just like almost on every day across North America, in the evening hours when people get home from work, 5, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., there's a spike in energy demand at that time. When people are cooking dinner, you're turning the AC or the heat up because everybody's home, and there's that demand for electricity. And that's where really the benefit of numerous battery energy storage facilities across a region really becomes a strength, because it's able to serve just that demand and not much more. And so it kind of eliminates the need for just additional power plants, which are more expensive and take longer to construct. And you can kind of see this if you're like me and you read news about energy. It is in the news in terms of the amount of energy storage that exists in Texas and how that is helping the grid manage various weather events, and how more battery energy storage is needed to meet the demand of just your growing region, as well as there's new manufacturing, data centers, just a variety of new types of demand for electricity that we're seeing here and across the country for the first time in many years. So now I want to just speak more to why here, why Kennedale, and why this place. Why can't we put this somewhere else is the question I'll always get from folks. So on this map in the white is the city limits of the city. In the red and in the orange are your major transmission line corridors. And from these lines and from the Encore substation, more distribution lines that serve all of your residents stem from the power that goes up and down these red and orange lines. In particular, the lines that are connected to this substation and that transect this area from east to west are at times under stress. Oftentimes throughout a year, there are times where demand for power outstrips the supply that exists. And that is why this facility would benefit this area and can only really be placed in and around that Encore substation. And I'll speak a little bit more to that when we get to the site plan as well. So Mr. Mikowski, these next two slides I created to answer the question that you asked earlier. I just want to speak a little bit to the zoning of the area and what I, as someone from out of town, could expect or would expect in terms of future development of this immediate area around this parcel. So in the red box, that is the parcel of land. It's total 48 acres. It's the 509 South New Hope parcel. That is the only area where we're proposing to build anything except for our access road. Like Mr. Gonzalez said, to the north and to the south and to the east are industrial properties, and they're zoned industrial as well. And if I advance my slide here, you can see the floodplain. So what exists in this area and throughout the center of this parcel is 500-year, 100-year floodplain, as well as floodway. We'll have to hire a civil engineer to kind of do our own analysis of exactly where that floodplain is precisely and where the floodway is. I think the data we have from FEMA and the data the city has from FEMA shows the floodway ending there, but I suspect that's not true, that the floodway probably extends. And I bring that up because you really can't build anything in the floodway. That's the most restrictive portion of flood regulation. Okay, so this is the site plan, and in the orange lines, I tried to trace what exists in your 11 by 17 site plan is a hatched line which shows the planned future Little School Road extension, and that is the extent and the route that I think the city currently contemplates in terms of its current location or contemplated location. It extends from east to west along the north side of this parcel. And we initially, when we cited this project, we're hoping to place this facility right there where the orange line is, because that's close in proximity to the Encore substation, is more easily developable land, and it's also more tucked away, I guess I would argue, in terms of being next to that Encore substation, and even farther back behind anything that fronts on South New Hope Road. But we were able to, once working with the city and kind of identifying where their planned right-of-way is, with knowing that information and knowing, like I said before, where the floodplain is, we determined that we could still make this project work and make a good project that's still well-sited to the south of the floodplain, near kind of that southeastern portion of the parcel. And so you can see our access road coming off of South New Hope Road. And that access road might move. We'll work with the city in terms of the fire marshal and anyone else that has any opinions about where that access road needs to go. We can, of course, adjust that. And as you move to the east, you get into our fenced area. And our fenced area acreage, in terms of the footprint of this facility, is 8 acres at maximum. So 8 acres within the total 48-acre parcel is the maximum footprint we're considering. When you consider the battery containers themselves, it's much smaller than that 8 acres. This facility, like we said, is a 200 megawatt facility. The total lifespan proposed is 20 years for the equipment. The project has a perimeter fence per the National Electric Code to keep folks out and keep people safe. And that perimeter, anywhere it doesn't have existing robust vegetation. We will vegetate that perimeter with evergreen screening. And the project will generate substantial property tax benefits for the city of Kennedale, as well as the school district itself, where most of the benefit goes, as well as Tarrant County. And with construction, we can say this, we have evidence of this now with our facility that we recently constructed in Rosenberg, Texas, that it will generate over 50 construction jobs. Okay, I'm gonna let our electrical engineer of record come speak to you a little bit more about safety.
Yeah, I'll just go over this fairly quickly, but just give you an overview of what these boxes actually are, what they look like, and what's going on inside of them. So this is kind of a picture of what you see on the site plan from a top down. The boxes with the black roofs are the boxes that have the batteries inside. So the module you see there cut off, that is a battery module. And then at the bottom of each section of that, there's a liquid cooled inverter. So string PCS, it's just a inverter. So your battery modules are filled with cells. A battery cell is essentially the size of your cell phone. Also, your cell phone has a lithium-ion battery, so that's basically what's in there. They will connect those in a combination of series and parallel. Then all those modules will get connected to the inverter. The inverter will take the DC from the battery, make it AC. So out of that black roofed container comes AC power. Then that goes to the skid on the top, which has auxiliary power distribution box. So that's what's powering the cooling inside the containers. And then a medium voltage transformer just to step up the voltage to what we need to move the power around. And this is the one I want to talk a little bit more on. So this is the safety measures that are inside each one of these containers. And this is really obviously a very important part to you guys and to understand for everyone around these projects of why we feel comfortable that these are safe. So I'm going to start with the detectors, right? So we have a gas detector, a smoke detector, and a temperature detector in the container. They don't show it here, but there's actually 2 of each of those, so they are redundant, which are there to do exactly what you'd think they're doing, which is trying to detect if an event is happening. If an event is detected as happening, then we have redundant explosion prevention systems. So Kevin brought up the event in Arizona in 2019 where a container exploded. That was a tragedy, easily the worst event that's happened in the US. Again, it was a different chemistry, but there were other lessons to be learned from that as well, besides just the chemistry, which is how do we build these boxes safer? And the main thing that got into the code after 2019 is anti-explosion systems. So that's what we have here. The exhaust fan is step 1 of that, which is compliant with National Fire Protection Agency, NFPA 69. That's an active ventilation system. So what happens is if those detectors detect that something's going on, the exhaust fan will pull out all of the gas from the container and shoot it up into the sky. And that's exactly what we're analyzing in our plume study is, well, then where does it go once it gets outside of the container? If this whole container were to have thermal runaway at the same time, which we can talk about, but that's incredibly unlikely. And then if for whatever reason the exhaust fan fails, we also have a redundant system, which is the deflagration panels. And those are compliant with NFPA 68. And that's a passive system. So it's not electrically operated. It's strictly mechanical. And what the deflagration panels do is if for whatever reason the exhaust fan failed and there were gases building up in that container, before a door would explode off, those panels simply open up because of the pressure inside the container. Again, releasing those gases up. The cloud is buoyant, so everything in the plume will go up and continue to rise. And then what we will show in our plume study is how quickly does that actually dissipate so it's not a hazard to anyone around, including firefighters who might be within the project boundaries. And then on top of that, we also have a sprinkler system inside. That's the red piping that we could hook water up to and spray on the batteries. Traditionally, water has been shown to actually be more harmful to spray on the batteries. So what we typically advise is spraying water outside of the container to keep it from heating up any adjacent containers. And that's what has been shown in industry to be very effective. There's also a gaseous media there to extinguish any non-battery fire if there were some sort of electrical event, which Kevin talked about. Also, one of the New York events recently was actually an electrical problem in a battery container. We have a means to put out that type of fire as well inside of each one of these containers. That's a really high-level overview of safety. Happy to answer questions about that, but I'm going to turn it over to Ethan and Parker to close this up.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. I just wanted to reiterate that, we've been working with the planning staff, working with the city, working with the engineers who are building the road. We really want to do this as a team with y'all's input. And so if you guys don't feel comfortable voting tonight, we're here to hear your questions, hear your concerns, and if there's any other, studies you might want to see, suggest, we're very happy to table this discussion, go and get those, and bring back anything that you might want to see before you guys feel comfortable taking a vote on this.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. I did have one quick question for staff. Could you come back to the podium before we go a little further here? Need a quick read, being that you're the UDC specialist here. Given the discussion you had earlier about this is kind of, there's no precedent for this before in Kennedale. I'm looking at our procedurals for, in section 24.3, standards of approval. One of the conditions for granting or denying an application, for it to be, even for a conditional use permit, the city council has to take in consideration the following factors. And it says, number one, it's conformance with applicable regulations and standards established by the UDC. Well, if we don't have that, wouldn't we be almost in violation at that point of our own UDC? Because we don't have those factors if it's not been developed. So my next question on top of that is a two-step. When would that, what kind of timeline are we looking at to be able to possibly allow for those type of changes? Or is there a way we might be able to kind of do an ad hoc change for something like this? Because I'm a little concerned right now, given the other two as well, compatibility with existing permit uses. Well, there's no real definition of this permit use.
I don't think it would be in conflict with that particular language there. The essence of a CUP is to consider something brand new. And so the procedural wise, though, if you feel that, or if P&Z and both council, and it's speaking mainly council, that if there's additional review, discussion, studies that need to be brought forward, then that process would need to play out before they would, take action on it. It'd probably be best to be prudent in that, but I don't believe it'd be in conflict of it, because the nature of a CUP is set up here, but in other jurisdictions to consider exactly this as a new land use. We do have established land uses that require a conditional use permit if that were to go in place, and then in that sense, we have definitions for those existing land uses. So it'd be a matter of P&Z and council to determine the compatibility with all that. But I think we're okay as far as procedural wise, that we wouldn't be in
I'm just a
conflict
little
with that.
hesitant on that part of it right there, given kind of the nuances when it comes to actually conditionally using this. And one of the other things I'm looking at as we all know, the extension for Little Road is not necessarily set in stone. So if that happens to go a different direction, it doesn't necessarily change the zoning. We have no problem there, but what it does change is the conditional use. I mean, it could actually end up invalidating this entire program or project if the city or the city council or the other engineer establishment decides that this particular contingency is not the way to go, and it actually moves again. So now I'm concerned about, well, is that a discussion we need to let play out before we look at saying, okay, we can green light a recommendation to the city council for something to this effect? So I'm a little concerned about, I think we're maybe a little ahead on this. I just want to get your input on that.
Understood. It doesn't sound like I'd probably be, provide enough context to sway your disposition on that particular item. Happy to go back and get more clarification and report back to P&Z with that as we continue this conversation. And just like Cypress Creek mentioned, that they're happy to continue the conversation. We have it on the agenda as an action item, but it doesn't necessarily mean action has to be taken. The important thing about tonight was having the public hearing, getting the input from the community, and they were looking forward to that opportunity to present to P and Z. And I imagine council will probably hear what was been discussed tonight anyway. But it's important that we have, at least have the public hearing tonight, take the comments from the community, and then if we need to report back or if it's tabled, it sounds like they're open to that. I don't know if they certainly don't appear to be in a rush to get, there's a lot of other studies and things like that that they're still working on, and then we can report back to you as well.
That would be my information right now, but I'm going to go ahead and obviously let the rest of the board speak if they have questions, and absolutely allow the public to also have their say. So that's where I'm going to hold. Anybody else? Questions? Okay.
I saw a study that says that the average lifespan of a BESS battery system is about 8.31 years. And some of these batteries have between a 5 to 15-year lifespan. And I was wondering how y'all's technology is able to get this battery, how is it able to lengthen the battery lifespan to 20 years? And after 20 years goes by, what will the strategy be? Would these batteries need to be replaced, or would they need to be, I guess, recharged or something like that?
Be a question for staff or for the
For the
okay, excellent,
expert.
because I was gonna say, I have an iPhone 6 still. And I get an hour at it at the most. Yeah, no, I think he answered the question, so we're good. Yeah, great question. I think the bigger question is, why were the other batteries lasting so little? And there's two answers to that, two parts of that. One is the chemistry. Again, the chemistry, LFP has gotten a lot better. Two, which is the bigger influence on how long a battery lasts, is its use case. So that's simply how often are you using the battery every day. A lot of those sites, they were doing different things than what we are proposing with power. They're doing stuff like what's called frequency regulation, where they're constantly charging and discharging the batteries all day, which is really hard on the chemistry in the battery. Ours is not designed to do that. We're just up 2 hours, down 2 hours, once a day doing that. And because of that, that's partially why they're able to last longer. Secondly, this technology's come a long way. This industry really follows the electric vehicle industry. If you know anyone with electric vehicle, the common complaint 5 years ago was, I can't drive far enough. That still is a complaint, but it's gotten a lot better. And this is benefiting from those advancements in technology as well. The batteries are just able to last longer and be a lot safer.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for your answer.
Yeah, you bet.
And have y'all done a study of how much this installation will benefit the city financially, as in how much tax income it might possibly bring?
I believe there was an exhibit included in your packet, and I apologize for all the information we've given you a lot, but I believe there's some estimates in there, and we're going to, since that was created several months ago, update that information as well to get you an updated chart. But I don't have it in my PowerPoint, but there's a bar graph illustrating the financial benefit to the various taxing districts.
Okay, and after the 20-year lifespan, the company will pay to replace the batteries, right?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely, it's our responsibility.
Okay.
To the landowner and to all the various agreements we have with the utility to decommission the facility if that's required and needed for any purpose.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public discussion. And we're going to do that at 7:26. Mr. Horner, you'd like to go ahead and come up to the stand, just state your name, your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak at that time.
George Horner. I own the shop at 1004 East Kennedale Parkway. My concerns were, mostly fire-related. We recently, within a year and a half ago, had a fire right back in that area. Thermal runaway is caused by, I guess, overheating of the batteries, short circuit. That fire being right there in that location, I don't know how well that would have gone. So my concerns are, there because we've had a fire there. It took, I think, 5 cities with their fire department to help us control just that type of fire. As they talked about, it's like a electric car. The fires I've heard of those doesn't get put out with water, and I don't know that Kennedale has the materials, at hand to address, those type of fires. But, those are just my concerns.
All right, sir, thank you very much for bringing those up to our attention. And one of the things I did notice on the IAFC bulletins, the basic first line of defense on this is just to let it burn out. The second one, of course, is to mitigate any kind of expansion by watering down and using thermal cooling, if you will. And of course, the last one would most likely be a halon or a type B. So just for the record on those, gentlemen and ma'am. If you, that bulletin is in your packet. Now, we didn't receive any other requests to speak. Was there anybody else? Oh, you got one? All right. I was about to ask if anybody was ready to go. All right, Mr. Norwood. Come on up, state your name and your address for us. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Demetric Norwood, address is 600 South New Hope Road. I have a couple of questions. I'm always intrigued by what the word substantial means when people start to say how much is going to benefit the city of Kennedale financially. Substantial, of course, can have some very different meanings from one entity to another. It just seems a bit vague. So that's one question. And well, kind of a sub-question, is there a specific dollar amount? Because I know estimates. I mean, I have a degree in accounting, so I know how to make numbers look great to whatever audience we want them to present it, to be presented to. So just something a little bit more concrete other than substantial. We've had other people come into the city wanting to develop different areas, talk about how much it'll benefit the city. Those numbers tend to be highly inflated. And for someone who's living directly across the street from where you guys are proposing to build this, how is it going to affect my taxes? So from a very personal standpoint, how will that affect my family and kids? And then does the city have a plan at all to implement any type of increase in finances for things that we need, like the lifelong conversation of just getting some of the humps on New Hope Road out of the road so people won't crash and die like has happened in recent years? But then also from a safety standpoint, because I live right across the street, you guys mentioned the explosion back in 2019. It's easy, I think, sometimes, and I don't mean to be harsh when I say this, but it's easy sometimes to talk about how unfortunate something was when we were miles away, right? Again, I'm right across the street. So if an explosion did happen, although hopefully it never does, but in the event that it does, how, based upon the technology that you guys have contained in these cells, how likely would, if an explosion did happen, how likely would the safety precautions that are taken eliminate further explosions. You know what I mean? So one part may be contained. How likely would another part be? You said water the outside. Well, if there's a train that's stuck on the track and water can't be put on the outside to contain any future explosions, should I have, I mean, we've got life insurance, but I'd rather not that thing pay out, anytime soon. So, and unfortunately, if there was an explosion, if I have life insurance or not, my wife and kids and everybody around us are gone anyway. So, those are all real things because you're putting this right in the middle of a residential area. In spite of how it's zoned, there's always been zoning issues. But in spite of that, again, people are living feet away.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Russell Fincher. The gentleman, he just answered my questions. Oh, he did? Yes. I mean, you have every right to come up here and reiterate it if you'd like. All right. Just come on up, state your name and your address.
My name's Russell Fincher. I live at 510 South New Hope Road. Another question was y'all was talking about the fire department that y'all give them. I mean, as far as the calling in for hazmat, if there has to be training done, will the city, our taxpayers have to pay to have them trained to fight y'all's fires if they come from that, or will y'all be paying them on a position like that? I don't know. Like the gentleman was talking about, the explosions. That's, you can't guarantee that it won't happen. So if something like that, and then it's talking about a floodplain, what are y'all gonna be doing as far as the floodplain to guarantee us that that will not get down into our creeks? If something like that was to happen. So, that's just a couple of my concerns on stuff like that. Thank you.
All right, was there any further comments, questions, or concerns need to be addressed at this time? You gotta fill it out even though you're... Come on up, go ahead and state your name, your address, and do me a favor and fill out a request to speak when you're done.
One of the forms of there.
I have to do a form first?
Yeah, go ahead and speak, and we'll just
That'll
catch the
work.
form afterwards.
I'm Luann Hull. I live at 416 South New Hope Road. So I know the gas line runs through this property. If they have an explosion, what's going to keep from exploding the gas line that runs right there? I mean, surely they know about the gas line running through there, but it runs through that property. So that's another risk.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Sorry to have you fill that out for such a short question, but it is, we do capture this for posterity. All right, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close commenting at, say, 7:34. All right, so again, I'm gonna make a comment that I don't feel like right now we are in a place to be procedurally correct. I don't think there's a lot of information, or shall I say enough information and a timeline where things can actually shift that may end up causing this to be completely restructured as conditional use as far as it's concerned. A lot of great questions and concerns brought up by our citizens. With that in mind, I personally feel that we should probably have a read from council and then get some further information and table this at this time to re-adjourn, or just to adjourn at this point, table, and try to get some more information to make a more educated and beneficial decision or recommendation. Did you have another one? Oh, okay, okay, just making sure. Staff, you have any comments on that?
No, certainly I'll take the chair's questions under consideration, and report back. If the decision is made to table it, I'm sure a member will motion for that, and then we can continue the conversation. Look forward to it. I know they do as well, and certainly would welcome the opportunity to provide the community answers to their questions.
I appreciate that, sir. I just want to make sure when our council gets a hold of this, they have some really good, well-trodden information to be able to make a decision. So with that, I'd like to take a motion to table.
Can we open it back up to the developers, see if they have any responses?
Sure, you can, yeah, absolutely. You don't have to give a motion yet.
Huh?
You don't have to give a motion yet.
Yeah, can we
All right.
open it back up to the developers, see if they have anything that they want to add
Sure,
to
go
some of
ahead.
the public comments that we received?
You're more welcome to respond to those comments or
Okay.
questions.
I very much appreciate that. I'll take a couple that I heard and let my colleague speak to some of them as well. First on the gas line, now I wish I had my map back up here, but the gas line, we are aware of that. And it runs along the northern border of this parcel. It shares that boundary with Encore's property. And due to another citizen's comment, due to the proposed road, we've moved our proposed facility well to the south of that proposed road and to that gas line. So with our facility currently proposed to the south of the floodplain, we're well away from that gas line, and we would never propose to build anything on top of a gas line. We simply can't do that. And I guess just generally speaking to the proposal of the future plan roadway, it's a sticky, tricky situation for us as well. You know, we spent months kind of discussing it with staff to try to identify where that might go, and you guys are going through your natural process of trying to identify the best right-of-way that meets the needs and the costs associated with road expansion. And so we wanted to see where that right-of-way was going and realized that we wanted to move our facility away from that. To your point of it potentially moving, that's, I guess, a hypothetical that might occur. But our hope is that with the size of the parcel, that even with kind of the road right-of-way proposal, there's room for us to maneuver around it. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to work with y'all to propose of the facility around that road right-of-way. I guess, Jacob, you want to speak to any of the other safety concerns?
Yeah. Really appreciate the community being here and raising their concerns. It encourages me that people care about this stuff, as you should. I'm going to start with Dimitri. Thank you for your question on explosion. So I'm going to start with, again, reiterating why I think an explosion is incredibly unlikely, and then if an explosion were to happen, what would happen. So on top of the redundant systems that I showed in our slides, really the primary reason I don't think an explosion will happen is because this has been tested, exactly like staff alluded to. The tests that they do on these batteries is they start with just the cell, which I talked about. There's a bunch of cells inside the module. They take a cell, they try to start it into thermal runaway, see what happens. Then they do the same thing on the module itself, and then they'll do the same thing on the container. So these batteries that we're proposing have gone through all of that testing. What all of that testing showed is, one, no fire, just a bunch of smoke. There's no flame from these batteries when they were intentionally put into thermal runaway. And two, more importantly, if they started thermal runaway intentionally on one cell in a module in the container, the thermal runaway did not spread to surrounding modules or surrounding containers during the test. So basically the impact is contained into one module inside of one of those containers that has 48 modules. And then the gas should get out via the redundant systems we talked about. If all that stuff doesn't operate like it's actually been tested to and is designed to, and the codes say it should be tested to, and something does explode, because of where our site is located, which Parker said, it's quite a ways away from any of the actual areas where people live. I don't think it would be a risk. And also importantly, the Arizona incident, which Kevin brought up, where there was an explosion in 2019, containers back then were designed to be walked into. So what happened on that actual facility. You can look this up. This is a public report. It's very interesting, especially if you're interested in this stuff at all. Is the firefighters went to the container, and the containers were designed to be walked into. There was no anti-explosion systems because they weren't required by code yet. We have redundant anti-explosion systems here. The firefighters opened the door to go into the container because they thought they had to walk in and fight the fire. And when they opened the door, it introduced oxygen. The door blew off. Our containers are not walk-in. They're not designed to be opened at all, so that should never happen. And I didn't mention this, but we have the active ventilation system first. Then we have the deflagration panels that I talked about. The doors to the container where you actually access the batteries are actually a third layer of redundancy. Those are designed to, if the active ventilation fails and the deflagration panels fail, the doors themselves will just open up. They won't blow off like what happened in Arizona. It won't explode. So really the only way that I see one of these exploding is if you actually like just put a bomb inside and try to blow it up. The batteries themselves are not going to explode. So, but totally appreciate the concern. I would be asking the same things. And in terms of the comment about it's easy to say when it's not in your backyard, I've been at some of the sites that Kevin mentioned to help put them back together within 48 hours of stuff happening. So I've seen it and I recognize that it's a real concern. It should be a real concern. So appreciate that. Russell, you talked about training. Will we be paying for any training and potentially any other equipment necessary for the fire department to make sure that they feel comfortable and prepared to handle anything on the site? I think that is most of the safety stuff.
Yeah, I think the last comment I heard was in regards to the floodplain, and so that's just a part of the site plan and the maneuvering here in terms of where we're proposing the facility, both around the floodplain as well as around the city's planned roadway. And so we will stay well away from that, as well as design the facility to be in a low-lying area, which we do often. And so these facilities can actually be raised up on pilings, and so we would absolutely do that in this type of area to give it some wiggle room for kind of a worst-case storm event, that sort of situation.
Question real quick. Has a study been done on the actual substrate out there as far as like if you was to actually do a pier, and like a pier setting?
Oh, and the soil or the
soil
geotechnical
itself?
analysis. Have we completed the geotechnical analysis? We will complete a geotechnical analysis to learn that very question, but we have not yet completed that.
Okay, because that's going to hinge a lot as well.
Absolutely.
A lot.
Yeah, is there bedrock? What kind of
How
stress test?
far down you're going to have to go, whatnot.
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely.
I'm not sure how deep the water table is there, being in a low-lying area with that particular area.
Yes, absolutely. We'll test the soil before we get anywhere near procuring equipment for that type of thing. Absolutely. Yep, another answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to add for Mr. Norwood that you asked about two things, the specific financial benefit. Like we said, we have a memo on that exact dollar number that was provided to the committee, but it's about 3 or so months old. It's a little dated, so we're going through the process of re-upping that. So I'm happy to reach out and give that to the whole committee, but to you as well if you're interested. And also, how will it affect your taxes, which is a great question. Not many people are thinking about that. That's another study that we expect is underway. We expect to have done in the next 2 weeks or so, is a study of all of the operational battery sites in Texas and how it has changed the property value of that parcel, but also of the surrounding neighborhood. And so I'll get that information as soon as that study comes back in.
So I have the handout that's part of it. It's also online. If you go to the Kennedale public page, it'll be in there as part of the packet. But basically, the 20-year estimated land use or taxes generated from the land use plus the storage is estimated about $33.2 million. That's a 20-year study. And it's going, and they studied it based upon Kennedale ISD, Kennedale City, Tarrant County Hospital, Tarrant County, and then Tarrant County College. So they've got it all broken out on there as to what it would be. And for the city itself, the 20 years, they're estimating $75,000 coming just from the land, and then an additional $10 million coming from the the storage, land plus storage, or the land plus storage would be the 10 mil. Just the usage of the land would be 75,000.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I have just one more question. Yeah, thank you so much for all of the detailed answers that y'all gave. But my question is whether or not the facility is constructed, would there be any difference to the citizens of Canada? Like, for example, if the facility was not constructed, would citizens expect to see maybe blackouts during severe weather? Or would there be any other differences, like, say, a reduction in energy bills for the citizens of Canada if the facility was constructed or not?
That's a great question. I'll try to take a stab and let Jacob speak to anything else that I'm missing. So it's kind of two questions. The first I'll address is cost. So your grid is a large system, right? It involves multiple institutions and bureaucracies. So how costs are arrived to is very complicated. But what we can say for sure is that these facilities, battery energy storage facilities, are the cheapest and quickest and easiest way to deploy a piece of energy infrastructure that provides energy to a community and to a neighborhood. And it's much cheaper and quicker in comparison to a traditional power plant. And so as these facilities grow in number, that puts downward pressure on costs for the entire system, simply because they're easier and more affordable to deploy than, say, building a large power plant. In terms of your first question, when it comes to reliability and resilience, there's a couple different ways to think about it. Right now, the only source of electricity when you go and turn on your light switch is from your distribution and transmission lines. That's the only place it comes from. With the addition of a battery energy storage facility, then you have two sources of electricity throughout a day. And so that's the simplest way I can think of describing how it adds resilience and reliability to your system. And certainly that resilience and reliability grows as there's more of these facilities across your entire metro region. Add anything to that?
Yeah, just a short, interesting tidbit for anyone interested. Kevin, you mentioned how California is at the front of the curve. Texas isn't far behind on this. California last week actually had a day that was very hot, and batteries were actually generating more electricity than any other type of generation in the state. It's, again, you can go look up the articles, but yes, batteries, like Parker said, the more of them on the grid, the better for everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for this project, if it is constructed, do y'all have plans to make it even bigger or maybe even construct another power plant?
No.
So
We do not have plans to expand this or do anything else to the property.
Okay, so this project will be, that'll be it, if it's approved and constructed.
In terms of the size and scope, that's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
Actually, it looks like you have something on your map. It says it's space reserved for future augmentation, so additional areas.
Right, yeah, you want to speak to augmentation in terms of, that's not a growth of facility, but go ahead.
Yeah, so two things. One, yes, that's really there as a placeholder, just so we know there's land for it. Our intent would not ever be to, but what happens is over time, just like your cell phone battery lasts less than it did when you bought your cell phone, these batteries degrade a little bit in their states of health. So if we wanted to maintain a maximum duration, we could add more batteries in the future. It wouldn't change the size. It would still be a 200 megawatt, 400 megawatt hour project, but it would just maintain that nameplate.
Anything further? All right. Well, I go back to what I was saying earlier. I think there's a lot of projects that we have, they're going to intertwine. I mean, I think it's a great idea, something that the state of Texas needs. I mean, I'd love to bring something like this into Kennedale, but to be prudent about it, I think there's a little bit more information we need to get and bring that forth so we can ensure we get our city council a good read and picture of what they're looking to do and what they're wanting to agree to and what not to. So I still go back with the motion to table.
Nathan, are we available to, is our city attorney, are they available for comments about process for approving this without it being approved already in the UDC?
They're not here at the moment, but if someone makes a motion to table it, just if you'll report to staff or mention table it to when. So if that's the next meeting, that's the important part of it. But any questions, the questions that were raised tonight by the community, ones that they spoke to, the additional studies that they have underway, I'm sure they would like to present that back. And so we can return at another junction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to kill this, but I don't think there's enough information as well. So my thing is, I definitely want to give the developer an opportunity to bring up further information to, especially to make sure our citizens are comfortable with this, as well as our other developments and projects that are out there. So that's why I'm looking to, maybe we just need to kind of tap the brakes just a little bit and get that information down. So again, I'll motion to table to the next meeting.
So I would also, I want to add to your motion. So I don't know if I can just add to the motion or if we need to,
You can,
do I need to make another
Well,
motion?
I would think the chair needs to call for a motion.
yeah, I'll call for a motion on that, but you're more welcome to, what's your thoughts?
So I as well, I like this project a lot. I understand it makes a lot of sense where it's at. There's not really anywhere else for this project to go without where everything else is at. It is to be that close to the Encore substation. Just everything about it, its location makes sense. This parcel of land is a very, very difficult parcel of land to develop, especially with the amount of floodplain that is restricting the land use of it, the future development and plans to have Little Road run through there at the north side where they initially wanted to build this because that's where the land is at. And it's also closer to the substation. I think this is a smart way for Texas in general to be moving to be having battery or to be having energy storage. That for whatever reason, the way that it's just our electric grid, the way that it has been established and planned out is that it's always on. There's no way to mitigate it. And if it's essentially if whatever is produced isn't used at that moment in time, it just goes to waste. And yet as residents and as, we still have to pay for that. It's part of the reason why our electric bills are so high is because we're paying for energy that's not being used. And then to add insult to injury, they tack it on whenever we are in high demand and they add those premium surcharges in there. So I think this is a smart way for Texas and to be moving to be able to capture some of that excess storage, to be able to be more efficient users of the electricity that is being generated. That being said, I do hear the comments from the chair about, are we doing this in the right fashion to where whatever decision comes out of this in council is legally correct? With the changes to approve a conditional land use that doesn't actually exist at this moment in time. I understand the comments from Nathan that this is what it's for. So what I will motion is that we will table this to our next regularly scheduled meeting, pending a comment from city attorney that we can approve this without having to amend our code first. So that is my motion.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor of tabling, conditional to legal representation? Yes, sir. Okay, well, I'll get a second then. We'll get a second. Yeah, he made the motion, I went in and seconded. Anyway, contingent on speaking to legal representation, also getting a little bit more information as far as where other projects are going, to table this to the next P and Z opportunity. So, all in favor? Okay, motion to table is unanimous. All right, and with that, we do not have any executive business at this time. So at this point, we can look at motion for adjournment at that point.
Motion we adjourn.
Second, please.
I second that motion.
All right, all in favor? All right, well, we are adjourned now, finally, at about 4 till. Thank you very much.